Have you ever noticed how weirdos almost never show up empty-handed at the Sting House? From chocolates to orange juice, we've seen all kinds of gifts. But this idiot did the unthinkable when he brought his own son. The sting that was conducted in Fort Myers, Florida will go down in history for featuring one of the most hated creepos to have ever been caught on the show. When the crew struck up a conversation with this man, nobody expected that he would turn out to be a lunatic of the highest order. The man I'm talking about today is Clifford Eric Wallach, a 270-pound pile of garbage who showed up at the Sting House in Fort Myers. It was a late Sunday afternoon and Clifford was the last weirdo lined up for the day. At first, everything seemed normal when Clifford pulled up into the driveway, but then he changed his mind and started to back up. At this point, the crew were curious to see his next move. Had he changed his mind and ditched the idea of meeting the young man he'd been talking to over the last couple of days? Or was he just being careful before actually stepping into the house? Turns out, Clifford's brains were way more twisted than you thought. While he did back his huge car up, it was not to really scoot off, but to park it by the street. So it looks like his plan was still on the go. Clifford then stepped out of the car and walked to the passenger door. At this point, each and every member of the crew expected him to pull out a bunch of flowers or a gift or something else that he brought along for the setup. But what Clifford pulled out was absolutely shocking. This demented man actually grabbed hold of his little son's hand and helped him jump out of the car. You see how tiny this boy is? Poor thing didn't even know what was happening. How could a dad put his own son through this torture? And just look at his face. Not a hint of distress or worry. I will never be able to understand what was running through his filthy head at that point, but Clifford actually walked hand in hand with his son towards the Sting House, and the crew backstage couldn't believe their eyes.
Oh no, he brought his son with him.
Can you feel the distress in the producer's voice? He was upset that someone would do something as vile as this. What was he even thinking? Or rather, was he thinking at all? And just look at him leading the way like they were heading towards an amusement park or something. But guess what? Things aren't going to be all that amusing anymore. The team was prepared to receive the disgusting man, but this sting wasn't going to be like any other usual one. They were going to have to taper things down, just for the sake of the boy who had unintentionally become a part of an elaborate sting operation. For someone as deranged as this moron, Chris was itching to fire him with questions and put him in a tough spot. But what do you do when he literally walks in with his son? Well, of course, Clifford was looking forward to meddling around and playing with someone, but this was no regular playdate to bring such a young child. I mean, how stupid was this guy really? What was the kid gonna do here anyway? Play in the other room all by himself? Or was the dad gonna sedate him to doze off? I guess we'll never know. But I can't imagine what would have happened if this wasn't a real sting. What if the kid happened to see some of Clifford's unsavory activities with the setup? How was he gonna explain to the kid what he was doing? It's so disgusting to even think about it. This dude deserves the worst kind of punishment out there. First of all, the fact that he contacted someone young is an offense in itself. Second, showing up at the house further cemented his intent. However, bringing his son along? There's definitely going to be a ton of charges lined up that will surely drive Clifford off the cliff, which is something I really want to happen. No matter how much I try, I can't understand why anyone would do something as stupid as this. Well, it looks like Chris has an explanation to this.
Of the child, his wife was working that day. He was in charge of the child and figured he'd just bring him along.
Yeah, that kind of sounds like a sane thing to do, right? But this wasn't your workplace or an outing with friends or something. Clifford was in charge of taking care of the kid. And well, this is how he planned on doing it. Clifford was specifically looking to have fun with whatever. Yup, those were his exact words from the chat logs. And what's more, he repeatedly mentioned the word fun, and even added an element of surprise when he told the setup to wait and see what happens when he gets there. Damn, nobody expected to see this for sure.
He's going up to the front door and he has his child with him.
I mean, the nerve on this guy to even walk up so confidently, literally dragging his kid into his crime. What sort of a father pulls crap like this? Was he really out of his mind? I can't imagine what the mother must have felt when she got to know about what Clifford was up to while she slogged her days off at work. At this point, I really want to know what he must have told his son before bringing him along. You can see how the son showed absolutely no resistance and simply followed right behind his dad. And what else could the poor chap do? He was probably promised a few treats and maybe a little TV time, while dad got busy treating himself in the other room. Dang, that even sounds horrible. Which is why I can't come to terms with how in the world world he thought it was okay to bring this kid along? I guess there's not much you can expect from someone who eyes young and innocent people to vent out their built-up urges. Anyway, coming back to the sting, the setup asked them to come over from the back door, and Clifford very willingly did just as he was asked to. Meanwhile, Chris couldn't figure out how to confront this monster without actually alarming the kid, but he had to do it anyway. And as soon as Clifford entered the house, this is what happened.
I gotta tell you something, and I'm gonna tell you just straight up right now.
That entry right there definitely took Clifford by surprise. I think he was startled, actually. Of course, he wasn't expecting to see a tall gentleman in the house, when just moments earlier he heard the voice of the setup he was in contact with. But what of the kid? No matter how hard I try, I can't snap out of thinking about this kid here. Does the father even realize that he committed a huge mistake, which might actually traumatize the kid in the future? These clips are gonna flash all over the net, and you can imagine what the kid might go through when he finds himself in the middle of a disgusting sting operation. Which is why Chris asked this loser to just walk away from the house, and he had to do so in the most subtle way possible.
And since you have your child here, I'm not going to pursue this. Okay. But I think you know what you were doing here, don't you?
And what did the prick have to say in response? Apparently, he was just here to take the setup for lunch. Like, oh yeah, spin your lies all you want, man, but we already know your dirty truth. You can just see how hard Chris was trying to hold himself back from lashing out at this dude right here. Now, we don't want this kid having to face more trauma than he already has to, right? And so Chris, in a very affirmative tone, asked the loser to do this.
My point is, because your child is here, I think it'd be best if you just went ahead and left.
Yeah, I agree.
You can clearly see how shit-scared Clifford was as he was trying to run away from the house as fast as he could. But little did he know that the cops would be waiting on him right outside the front door. The kid had no clue what was happening. He was probably expecting a candy or a cone of ice cream, but here he was being dragged around like a rugged doll. This time around, the cops had to be really careful, because you don't want the kid freaking out. Just as they circled around Clifford, a female officer came right in and scooped the kid off to one of the police cars. At this point, there were two things to be taken care of. One was to ensure the child's safety. He was definitely unsafe at the hands of his father. The second thing was to make sure that the kid doesn't see his dad getting arrested. Considering how tender the boy's age was, to witness his dad's arrest right in front of his eyes might leave a scar that cannot be wiped off easily, and the cops were aware of this unusual situation. Meanwhile, when the son was being taken away, reality had finally struck Clifford in his face.
Please give me my son, please.
Yep, that's not happening anytime soon, buddy. Now that we know how much you care for your child, there's no way that the cops are gonna hand him over to you. If you ask me, this was good for the kid, cause I can't imagine what kind of crap this skunk would have put his son through had he not been caught in time. But the story doesn't end here. Once Clifford was transported to the police station, the first thing he did to justify his actions was to blame his wife. It's funny how he was the one who was here handcuffed for trying to warm up his bed with someone he shouldn't be with, and yet the wife was the one responsible for it somehow. So, what did he accuse her of? Clifford in a statement said that there was a major lack of intimacy in his marriage, which is what led him to look for it elsewhere. Okay, I totally get that situation, but why don't you hook up with someone your own age then? Or are you such a big loser in life that none of the ladies were interested to be around you? Either way, it looks like Clifford was not done yet. Although he was arrested in 2006, he decided to take it up for trial. And what did you expect would happen? Despite several efforts from the defense attorney who claimed that Clifford only had a fantasy of dating men who looked young, but never really wanted to go ahead with his plan, as per the chat logs, Clifford finally got what he deserved. Of course, he was found guilty for not just contacting the setup to take part in disgusting activities, but for also putting his child at risk of danger. As a result, the man was put behind bars for 5 years and was charged with 10 years on probation. He also had to register as an offender for his entire life. This was one of the harshest punishments ever handed out to creepos who were caught in the Fort Myers sting, and rightfully so. I mean, this man even admitted that he planned to keep the child in a room and play a DVD while he got busy with the setup in the other room. This dude deserved a life sentence if you ask me. What gets me is the mom's reaction to this whole fiasco. Here I was expecting her to disown her husband, because what kind of mom would be okay with something as horrendous as this? But this woman was twisted in her own way. Can you believe it that she chose her husband over her innocent son? Yes, knowing that Clifford wouldn't be able to be around kids, the wife actually chose to send her son away and stuck with her husband instead. Trust me, I'm glad things turned out this way. Because what's with the mom, dude? The kid is definitely better off away from both of these parents, who clearly could not make any rational decisions in their lives. However, one would assume that 5 years in jail would have taught him a good lesson, but sadly, Clifford was made of something else. He went on a rant on an online platform called the Florida Action Committee, where he claimed that he was basically entrapped in the sting operation and how he had done nothing wrong.
With a DVD and go do whatever he was going to do with this.
Did you forget what you wrote in the chats? Or did you forget your conversation with a setup over the phone? It looks like Clifford suffered some kind of segmental memory loss during his time in jail, because he even accused the cops for mistreating him while he was locked up. He also accused the cops of shifting him from camp to camp until they finally placed him in a protective custody camp. Anyway, none of that matters now, as in 2012, Clifford was set free. After reuniting with his wife, Clifford lived in a gated community somewhere in Florida. Apparently, that house cost a whopping $500,000. I don't want to sound too judgmental, but this pretty much explains why the wife decided to stick around. Clifford was literally living his best life outside of prison, and as if that wasn't enough for him, he even started his own construction company. But none of this was hard work. The house was passed on to him after his parents passed away, and the company was a family business that he just took over once he was back. Talk about hitting the lottery once he got out of prison. No wonder he could pick himself up just days after leaving prison. However, his construction company too ran into trouble. He claimed that nobody was willing to hire him, and even if they did, they fired him just as quickly, because someone or the other recognized him from the show. This had now led him to have no proper job, which means no stable income. But I don't feel bad for this guy at all. He definitely deserved every bit of it, and even worse. News is that after his whole rant session on the internet, Clifford apparently moved from Florida to Monticello in New York in 2021. Well, good riddance, I'd say. Also, did I forget to mention that he has to update his status with the law enforcement every 90 days? Yep, that's what you get for being the jerk that you were. Hope he isn't pulling shit like this in New York, because the police department there is brutal, and this time around, he would be surely locked up for life. According to reports online, this loser's divorce was finalized just before he made his move to New York. That the wife finally realized what her husband is, but at what cost? She lost her kid, and that kid, who is 24 years old now, will definitely not take his parents back. I guess he has already suffered enough thanks to his parents' stupidity. Meanwhile, I hope New York is kicking this loser in the butt, literally and figuratively. But who knows? Some people just will never learn their lesson until they finally pay the price.